Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive? Today we're going way back to the late 1800s, exploring the life of a guy named Guy Bradley, a key figure in early conservation efforts in the Everglades.
Really fascinating story.
Yeah, and we've got a bunch of different sources to piece it all together. Wikipedia articles, a page from the National Park Service website, even a YouTube video from a hiker who walked a trail named after Bradley,
Oh, wow.
and an article from FloridaHeist.com.
Yeah, we should mention right off the bat that listeners might be surprised to learn that women's hats almost caused the extinction of entire bird species.
And Bradley's death actually sparked a national outcry and changed how we think about protecting the environment.
Bradley's story is a great example of how fashion trends in the past could have a huge impact on the environment.
Okay, so picture this. It's the late 1800s in Florida. Guy Bradley starts out as a guide and a plume hunter.
Plume hunter.
I know it sounds crazy now, but back then, bird feathers were super valuable, even more than gold.
They were.
They were used to decorate women's hats.
Exactly. Those delicate plumes from wading birds were very popular for hats.
Can you believe that?
I mean, think about it. A single egret feather could be worth $2,
Wow,
which is like over $60 today.
that's insane.
All that demand created this ruthless industry that just destroyed bird populations.
Jeez.
Yeah.
You know, I was reading that Bradley and his brother actually worked as scouts for a French plume hunter named Jean Chevalier.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and on one hunting trip through the Everglades, they killed almost 1,400 birds from 36 different species.
It's hard to imagine the scale of the plume trade back then.
Yeah, expeditions like that would just wipe out entire rookeries. Just tons of dead birds and chicks left to starve.
Bradley actually described those hunts as incredibly brutal.
It's really sad to think about. Do we know if Bradley ever felt bad about his time as a plume hunter? What made him change sides?
It's a good question. We don't have any direct accounts of his feelings, but it seems like witnessing that kind of destruction firsthand really changed him.
I can see that.
Around the same time, laws were passed to protect birds, but nobody was really enforcing them. And with his knowledge of the Everglades and hunting, Bradley was a natural fit for the role of game warden.
So he went from plume hunter to protector. That's a pretty big change. One of our sources mentioned he was actually recommended for the job by Kirk Monroe,
Kirk Monroe.
a pretty well-known conservationist.
That's significant. Monroe must have seen something in Bradley.
Yeah,
A real dedication to protecting what he once exploited.
it sounds like people recognized his potential for change.
Definitely. It wasn't just a job for him. It reflected a deeper understanding of the damage that can be done when we exploit nature.
So how challenging was his job as a warden?
Oh, it was incredibly difficult. He was basically responsible for this massive territory from Florida's west coast all the way to Key West, and he had to do it all alone.
Wow.
Remember, this was the very beginning of conservation efforts. They didn't have a lot of resources or manpower, and a lot of people just ignored the new laws protecting birds.
So was he in a lot of danger?
All the time. Guys like Bradley were constantly facing danger, often outnumbered and outgunned by people who just wanted to profit from plumes.
That's scary.
Yeah.
The sources mentioned him being shot at finding rookeries that he had warned people about, just completely wiped out.
Yeah,
That must have been incredibly frustrating.
absolutely. And as bird populations started to recover under his watch, the risks just kept getting bigger.
How so?
Plumes were still worth a lot of money, and for some people, the potential profit was more important than the law or even human life.
Yikes.
That's right. And that leads us to the really tragic part of Bradley's story, the event that made him a symbol of conservation, his death in 1905.
Yeah, I was reading about that. He got into a conflict with some poachers. The Smith family, right? They had threatened him before, hadn't they?
The Smiths were known in the area for illegal hunting, and when Bradley confronted them about killing egrets, a standoff happened, and he ended up getting shot and killed by Walter Smith, the head of the family.
That's awful.
Yeah.
And to make matters worse, Walter Smith claimed self-defense and was acquitted.
Yeah, it was a shocking miscarriage of justice. There was evidence against him, but Smith walked free after serving only 5 months in jail.
Oh.
People all over the country were outraged. Newspapers even. The New York Times covered the story.
Unbelievable.
And the fact that Bradley's killer got away with it really fueled the growing movement for stronger bird protection laws.
So in a way, Bradley's death was a turning point for conservation. It's amazing how one person's story can make such a difference.
Yeah.
Were there any other wardens who faced similar fates?
Sadly, yes. Around the same time, other wardens like Columbus G. MacLeod and Presley Reeves were also killed while doing their jobs.
That's just terrible.
These tragedies, along with Bradley's, really highlighted the dangers these men were facing and the need for better protection and tougher laws.
It sounds like their sacrifices helped change things, though. It seems like those incidents really shifted public opinion and created momentum for real change.
You're absolutely right. The national outrage that followed these tragedies, combined with a growing awareness of the terrible impact of the plume trade, finally led to some major changes in the law. In 1910, only 5 years after Bradley's death, the Audubon Plumage Act was passed. It basically banned the import and sale of bird feathers for fashion.
So that was a huge step forward. It sounds like Bradley's death helped bring about a new era of conservation in America. It's quite a legacy. One of our sources mentioned a trail named after him in Everglades National Park.
Yes, the Guy Bradley Trail. It's a popular hiking spot and a beautiful way to experience the same ecosystem he dedicated his life to protecting.
It's almost like walking in his footsteps, literally and figuratively. I remember that hiker in the YouTube video talking about flamingos and how they might be experiencing generational trauma.
Could that be related to Bradley's efforts?
It's an interesting idea, though. It hasn't been scientifically proven.
Yeah.
The idea is that since flamingos were once heavily hunted in the Everglades, they might carry a sort of collective memory of that trauma.
And as a result, even generations later, they might avoid certain areas.
That's a fascinating thought. It really makes you think about how our actions can have lasting effects even long after we're gone.
It certainly does. It emphasizes how important it is to understand how everything is connected in an ecosystem and how our choices can have ripple effects.
Speaking of honoring his work, I know there's also the Guy Bradley Award, right? Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. The Guy Bradley Award was created by the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. It recognizes outstanding achievements in wildlife law enforcement.
That's fitting.
It's a great tribute to his courage and dedication. It honors the people who are continuing his work on the front lines of conservation.
So each year we celebrate those who are carrying the torch, protecting our natural world just like Bradley did.
Exactly. And there's also the Guy Bradley Lifetime Conservation Award presented by the Audubon Society, which recognizes individuals who have dedicated their lives to promoting conservation and sustainability.
These awards really show how Bradley's story continues to inspire action and change all these years later. It's amazing how one person, even when facing such danger and ultimately tragedy, can make such a huge difference.
It's a testament to the power of individual action. We can all learn from Bradley's unwavering commitment to protecting the Everglades.
Absolutely.
Whether it's advocating for policy changes, supporting conservation organizations, or just being more mindful of our own impact on the environment, we all have a part to play.
Bradley's story is really powerful. It makes you think about all the choices we make and how they affect the world.
It does. And you know, while Bradley's story shows hope and progress, we can't forget that protecting our environment is still a challenge. The Everglades today is facing all sorts of new threats like invasive species and rising sea levels.
It still needs our attention and protection, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So while we're celebrating Bradley's work, we also have to remember that it's our responsibility to keep it going.
Right. It's like we've been handed the torch and it's our turn to carry it forward.
Exactly. We need to stay vigilant about protecting our natural world. And I think one of the most important things we can learn from Bradley's story is that everyone can make a difference.
That individual actions matter.
Right. Whether we're pushing for policy changes, supporting organizations, or even just being more aware of how we affect the environment, every little thing we do, every choice we make can help build a more sustainable future.
It can feel overwhelming sometimes.
Yeah,
But it's also empowering to know that each of us can play a part.
absolutely. It's a call to action for everyone to join in protecting our planet's natural treasures.
So for anyone who wants to learn more about Guy Bradley and what he did, we highly recommend a visit to the Everglades National Park.
Yeah, go walk the Guy Bradley Trail, see the beauty he fought to protect, and think about what you can do to continue his work.
There's also a book called Death in the Everglades if you want to really dive deep into his story. And the National Park After Dark podcast has a great episode about Bradley.
Checking out those resources can give you a better understanding of how important this part of conservation history is, and hopefully it'll inspire you to take action.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into the life and legacy of Guy Bradley. We hope you found it as inspiring as we did.
Until next time, keep learning, stay involved, and keep exploring.
And remember, even small actions can have a big impact. Thanks for listening.